What is up, everybody? Welcome to week 6 of the NFL season. Going to be breaking down this pretty fun Thursday night game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Looking mostly at this thing from a single game slate standpoint on FanDuel, but if you have some season long questions, you can get those in. If you have some props questions, I have a few that I like, but as usual, I'm going to be running down some things like historical optimal lineup trends, show you guys my game simulations and ranges of outcomes for tonight's slate. It's going to be a fun one. That total of 52.5 doesn't really feel like a Thursday night uh, point total. We have a lot of injuries. For the Eagles, it's their offensive line. For the BUCS, it's their defense. So welcome on in to the FanDuel NFL Q&A for this week. I'm your host, Brandon Gdula. I'm the managing editor over at numberfire.com. You can find all of my content at Numberfire. I do a bunch of simulations, some start-sit stuff to help you with all of your start-sit decisions, showing things like the probability that players are top 12 or top 24 within their position, rather than just kind of a you know a sit column based on some guys with some tough matchups. I put out some floor ceiling projections for the main slate. Those come out on Fridays. As always, I do an NFL heat check with Jim Sonis. We go over the main slate in detail. Lots to talk about on the main slate. But again, you can find all that work at numberfire.com. Remember, this is a Q&A format, so get those questions in. You can hit up the comment section on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch if you have questions for tonight's game. I see some rolling in, and keep them coming, but I want to break down this thing as I always do, looking first and foremost at this game from a high-level standpoint. Again, 52.5 point total, 6.5 point spread for the road Buccaneers. That implies a lot of scoring and a fairly tight game overall. I'm not saying it's going to be a 3-point game throughout, but it's not a double-digit spread. So I'll go over some of what that means historically from a single game slate. But get those questions in, and I will break down the overview for tonight's game. I always like to look first at individual matchups in terms of units. Looking here, Philadelphia and Tampa Bay really ranking about league average in passing net expected points per drop back allowed to opposing quarterbacks, which is basically, this Numberfire's expected points model shows that they're about league average defenses. One thing that stands out, though, is that they allow a high success rate, which with this combination of a high success rate and a kind of a middling or top 12 expected points per dropback number, kind of implies consistent gains let up, but somewhat stifling the deep play by contrast. So either way, not a passing matchup to avoid for either side here. As far as rushing goes, we know that Buccaneers defense has a really good rush defense, rating out basically, top 4 across the board in some key metrics for opposing running backs. Meanwhile, the Eagles are rating out kind of bottom tier in some of Numberfire's metrics, as well as adjusted FanDuel points per carry allowed to opposing running backs. So that could put us on Leonard Fournette for tonight. As far as receiving goes, Philly's about average. Really, if you're not top 5 or bottom 5, matchups kind of overrated. We do see a little bit of that though with the Buccaneers against running backs out of the backfield, which makes sense just because teams don't really run the ball in the Buccaneers. So just by nature, they're going to give up a lot of receiving production to running backs relative to what those running backs typically accrue. And then one more thing I like to look at here, some pace. Both teams top 12 in non-garbage time pace this season. Both teams also top 7 in pass rate. Again, outside of garbage time, with the Buccaneers leading, that's going to put us pretty heavily on Tom Brady first and foremost. So that's kind of an overview. I'm going to dig into some questions again. If you have some, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, and I'll get to those probably in just a second here. I'll be going over my sims, but let's see what we got here. Andrew on Facebook is asking, is tonight a night to fade Brady on in DFS and roster Evans or Brown, or roll with both Hurts and Brady and find value elsewhere. So that question, there's kind of multiple questions within that. I will show you guys this. Not that I was hiding it, but just a good time to show you guys. If you look at all optimal lineups in single game slates since 2019, the MVP has historically been a quarterback, and in games with totals above 50 and tight, the spreads between 4.5 and 8.5, we've seen the quarterback actually overperform from that perspective, being the MVP in optimal lineups about 54% of the time, which is about a 7-point boost. So, unfortunately, from this standpoint, that does point to Tom Brady. Rostering Tom Brady will not be people are going to want to roster Tom Brady at MVP. I get that. And additionally, in these types of game environments, we see the MVP come from the favorite at about a 60-40 clip, a little bit higher than that even. And it's most likely just that in these game scripts, the MVP is the favorite quarterback. So that points to Tom Brady. Again, that's still 34% of the time this has happened. And in my Sims, which, by the way, kind of ran things with and without Dallas Goedert, but I'm proceeding as if Dallas Goedert is not going to play, Tom Brady rates out as the MVP about 34% of the time, which is just on par with his historical average. So that's kind of how I'm viewing Tom Brady. Is second most likely favorite in the Sims. If you adjust for this context, historically, just the most likely play to be the MVP. So I'm not particularly fading Tom Brady. I think you can still play Tom Brady at MVP on FanDuel and differentiate in different ways, most notably by rostering him with one of his top three receivers. So Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and then a sort of tertiary, or I guess in that case, a quaternary or even quinary piece, where we would roster one of the tight ends because Rob Gronkowski is out again. So no, I'm not fading Brady. He's going to be very chalky at MVP. So you can find leverage by, playing him outside of the MVP. But again, all signs point to Brady being a great MVP pick, probability wise, relative to everyone else. And then the secondary question here is Hurts and Brady. With that, it's kind of hard to go with both quarterbacks, because if you do that, you're looking at 93-33 left for your remaining three positions. The one way that you can really make this work is by going down here to Zach Ertz, assuming Dallas Goedert doesn't play, and then you're back up to 10,750 for your final two. I think this is going to be a super chalky build, like a start. This very easily could be in the optimal because we have value with Zach Ertz, but probability wise, this is a good start. It's a very safe start. But game theory wise, I think this will be very popular, and I'm trying to avoid it in most situations. So I know that kind of doesn't answer your question to the point where I'm saying, I'm not going to fade Brady. I don't think you play both quarterbacks because the salary is too tight. And the most obvious way that you're going to get there is by rostering Zach Ertz, who is shaping up to be pretty popular, assuming Dallas Goedert does not play. Question from I Need Money on YouTube. Who do you like to score a touchdown on the Eagles side? I'll jump over to my Sims again and look at a few things here. Looking at NumberFire's projections and just seeing who we project at NumberFire. These aren't my projections that come from NumberFire. I use these to base the simulations on, with some dynamic ranges of outcomes based on, we know that a rushing quarterback typically has a bit of higher ceiling than a passing quarterback, which is why you see Jalen Hurts a little bit outperform Tom Brady from a top score perspective, despite the same median outcome. But I will sort this hopefully, and I had been having a lot of spreadsheet issues this week, so I had to kind of rebuild things. So hopefully this sorts properly. But okay, well that's good enough. And then let's filter this just to Philly. So NumberFire is saying that Miles Sanders, unsurprisingly, the most likely touchdown scorer from the Eagles at about 0.46, but on FanDuel Sportsbook, plus 210 to score. So kind of outperforms those odds there. So I like Miles Sanders in that situation, despite the fact that I know it's a really tough rushing matchup, but Miles Sanders can get targets out of the backfield. He kind of fended off Kenneth Gainwell from that standpoint last week. So I'm still fairly high on Miles Sanders despite the almost impossible rushing matchup. But we also have Zach Ertz at 0.27, Gainwell himself is at 0.31. Hurts is 0.41 to score a rushing touchdown. And Devontae Smith, I would probably go Sanders and Smith. I know it's the chalky way to go, avoiding Zach Ertz here, but if I had to pick one, it's going to be Devontae Smith just because he runs a ton of routes relative to everyone else, and he should get a little bit extra work if Goddard's out. So I'm gonna say Smith, but pretty decent odds across the board for some Eagles to get into the end zone. DJ's asking, is it safe to start the BUCS defense this week? Yeah, I would say so. You know, the Eagles offensive line is really decimated. No Lane Johnson, no Brandon Brooks, and some more injuries. Now the BUCS themselves are pretty banged up defensively, so you might have better options on the waiver wire, but all things considered, short week, Thursday night, even with the high total, don't worry too much about a high total when it comes to defenses. About 60% of defensive scoring from a fantasy standpoint just come from sacks and turnovers. Points allowed doesn't really do a whole lot. You need turnovers, you need some sacks, and that could be on the docket if the Buccaneers play from ahead and Jalen Hurts is forced to drop back extra. And he's going to drop back extra anyway, just because nobody really runs on the BUCS. They have opponents against them have a 77% pass rate, excluding garbage time. So that's crazy high. So I'd feel pretty good with the BUCS from that standpoint overall. Question from Jarvis: Hurts or Murray standard league? Oh boy, pretty good problem to have. It is really scary to feel like you're going to bench Kyler Murray, but he's got offensive line issues himself. His shoulder's not 100%. The wind is projected to be almost 20 miles per hour in that game, and that really points to a big downgrade. I would, again, I have an article, my start sit article on NumberFire. Each week goes up. It shows the probability that each player, in this instance, quarterback, finishes as a top 12 quarterback for the week, based on NumberFire's projections. Hurts is at 55%. Kyler's at 53%. I would probably lean Hurts just because I feel a little bit safer. That's one of those where it's close enough. I can't fault you if you really feel like it's Kyler, but I would lean Hurts, as scary as that is. DG's asking, start Khalil Herbert with Damian Williams out. Is Damian Williams rolled out? I must have missed that. I was too focused on this game. I did not see that Damian Williams was out, but if he's out, I'd play Herbert fine. Again, I have to do some updates to the start sit then, but I would be fine with Khalil Herbert, assuming that Williams actually is out. Oh, he's got on the okay. So yeah, if there's no Damian Williams, Khalil Herbert, I would say we've seen enough from him to start pretty comfortably over a lot of sort of, the guys that you would consider him against. So feel pretty good there, even though the Bears should play from behind. They still want to run the ball as much as they can. So that should lead to some extra carries for Herbert in that context. So if you have Herbert, pretty heads up pick up there. Producer Cal saying he sees it, confirmed. So thanks, Cal, and thanks, DJ. So news to me. Again, I had a lot of spreadsheet stuff I had to reset up here for this week. It's been a bit of a nightmare, and I was really focused on digging into this game. So very good call. But yeah, Khalil Herbert, I like that call for this week. Question from Philip, non-PPR, Beckham or Knox? Oh, goodness. So that's all right. With the wind for the Cleveland game, I might lean Dawson Knox there from a touchdown upside standpoint. I think the issues with Odell Beckham are a little bit overstated. So working his way back, he's around 60% of the snaps in his first game, around 75% the past 2 games. What you don't want to see is the 3 targets, 2 catches, 20 yards whenever your offense kind of erupts. But Odell Beckham still has a lot of high leverage looks going his way in terms of downfield work. Now, again, with some win concerns, that's problematic. I would be fine going with Knox in that standpoint, in that matchup, from that standpoint. But boy, I'm I might lean Dawson Knox there. So boy, that's a tough spot for Odell. I can't believe we're here, but that question alone kind of sums up Week 6 fantasy football for sure. Question from Greg: had Williams filling in this week for Kamara. Now that he's out, my options are Tony Pollard or Jamal Williams on the bench, or should I look to add an RB? Always look to add running backs if you can. That's kind of an obvious answer, but between the two, I think Jamal Williams makes for a fine play. I like this game. It's in a dome. We have wind concerns pretty much everywhere. And the Tony Pollard role is a bit overstated. He's been hyper productive on his snaps. And I've been looking into this. He's like 28th in PPR points per snap since 2016 among all flex players. And it's like a sample of like 2,300 guys. So he's really overperforming. I think Jamal Williams is very much in play in a game that's in a dome, controlled environment that always is good for fantasy points. So I would be cool with Jamal Williams in that spot. Question from Philip: do you think Adam Thielen will bounce back? Thielen for me is always a bit problematic just because the yardage upside is never really there for him. He's very touchdown dependent, and even with those touchdowns, you're looking at like a 2-touchdown game and he scores 17, fantasy points. That's not the type of receiver that I like to target. Will he bounce back? Honestly, he's been someone I've been eyeing up for years now as a touchdown regression candidate in the negative sense. So I'm not that high on Thielen, but in terms of if you're asking to trade him, who you would trade involving Thielen, or would you target him? I also publish Number Fire's trade values. Those go up every Tuesday. Shows standard league, half PPR, and PPR values. And it's what I like about these is they're based on rest of season projections, not a whole lot of conjecture and assumptions of roles. But I would definitely say I'm low on Thielen, but check out Number Fire's projections and that trade value chart. They're probably higher than I am personally. Question from Greg: the options on the waiver wire: David Johnson, Mark Ingram, Latavius Murray. Would you go over any of them over Jamal? Probably not, but you could pick up Latavius and just see what happens there. Not a whole lot of interest in the Texans backs, although Tyrod Taylor should be coming back soon, and that should be a boost to that offense. But I think you could pick up Murray if you have someone else that you could drop. Question from Chris: passing yards, Brady or Hurts? Okay, so I'm going to see what Number Fire says here. I know it's going to be Tom Brady, but Tom Brady 288, Hurts 254, 255, really. Yeah, it's really hard to go against Tom Brady. Their pass rate, again, in situation adjusted plays, non-garbage time plays, they just lead the league. Philadelphia is not particularly worrisome from a pass defense standpoint. So for me, it's a pretty easy path for Brady to lead over Jalen Hurts in yardage for tonight. So, it's close enough where it would probably simulate out to be fairly decent, but it's really hard to go away from Brady in this standpoint. Question from Larry: any updates on if Carson would be back on the field this week? I haven't seen anything personally. It'll also be not the most ideal matchup. No Russ. So not really that interested myself. Question from Bay Area football cards. Do I start Devontae Smith, Van Jefferson, or Jalen Waddle? I'm going to go Devontae Smith there pretty easily. I like Smith. I'm really high on him in terms of what this offense does and the role that he has. He runs like 10 more routes than any other Eagle, kind of consistently. Gets downfield work. It's a high risk play always, but definitely a better role for him than the other guys. I have Smith rating out about 46% likely to finish as a top 24 receiver for the week. Again, you can check this out on Number Fire and go to my start sit column. It shows the sort of baseline projections for guys. It's Smith pretty easily there, and I feel pretty good, even with their offensive line a bit dinged up. Another question from Philip. Non PPR, would you start Knox, Beckham, or Gaskin? Gaskin had an amazing role last week. Sounds like they want to get him the ball maybe a little bit more than they have. His snap rate had been pretty strong. It was about 65% weeks 1 through 3, then like down to 25% week 4, and then in this matchup against the BUCS, got a lot of receiving work. I think I'd go Gaskin there, just because even if it's non PPR, running backs can generate production on receiving. I think it's targets matter even in standard leagues, so I feel pretty good with Gaskin out of those three. All right, I want to make sure that I go over my simulations a little bit more in detail, just because that's the main focus of this show, is focusing on this single game slate. I'm gonna sort by median projections because this is where things get really, really interesting. We have Jalen Hurts and Tom Brady being about equal. We know that historically it's the favorite quarterback who is more likely to finish as the MVP based on Hurts's rushing ability. Rates out a little bit better for me from a ceiling standpoint, but a little bit worse from a top 5 standpoint. And just the 1.6 passing touchdown expectation for him versus 2.5 for Brady. But we have this huge tier of 6 guys between 11.2 and 12.7 FanDuel points across 10,000 slate simulations. It's Leonard Fournette, Miles Sanders, and then the 4 primary receivers in this game. So what do we do here? Well, again, jumping back to the historical optimal lineups, running backs do see a dip in these types of games in terms of their odds of finishing as the optimal MVP compared to the full sample, but they're still much more likely than receivers to get there, about 23 to 14%. Tight ends, I will note here, this makes it look like tight ends are in a really good spot. There have been, this is a 35 game sample, as you can see up here. In this sample, 3 tight ends were MVPs. Twice it was Travis Kelce. Once it was Robert Tonyan. Sure, these tight ends have multi-touchdown upside if things break their way. And if, multiple touchdowns go to, Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, Zach Ertz, it's really going to throw a wrench into the viability of the receivers, especially because they'll be fighting each other for targets and yardage anyway. But I just wanted to point that out, that this doesn't necessarily mean it's a great spot for tight ends. Still less than 10% likely for them to finish as the MVP. And again, 2 times that was Travis Kelce. And then I always like to look at kicker numbers. This is not a great game script for kickers. They're about 10 percentage points less likely to get into the optimal lineup in this type of game environment compared to overall games. That's because the total's high. It should mean more touchdowns. And that means, kickers have a floor, but they don't really have the ceiling to match. So not a great kicker slate. That doesn't mean you don't play any of them, but it's not a night to load up on kickers based on historical trends. And then of course, when the underdog is an MVP in these game scripts, surprisingly running backs fit well, but this is a 13 game sample out of the 35 total in this split. So if you're going to play an Eagle at MVP, not surprisingly, it looks like Jalen Hurts is the way to go. Now, of course, this doesn't adjust for tonight's matchup. This is just a historical thing. Miles Sanders doesn't have the greatest workload. It's a horrendous rushing matchup overall. And then we see a low probability for receivers to get there, but Devontae Smith does have a really high ADOT, high market share, so that leads to like a high upside play because the air yards will be there. So if I'm not going to roster Tom Brady at MVP, unsurprisingly, it's going to be Jalen Hurts at MVP. But if I'm going to go elsewhere with a non-quarterback, I think I'm really looking at Chris Godwin because he's coming off of a week where he had like the best workload among the Buccaneers receivers with those 11 targets. If you adjust for the fact that he had 3 downfield and 4 red zone targets, is equal to about almost 16 targets worth. Nobody else in this game had a target number, a weighted target number higher than 11. Again, you can see here, I'll zoom in. Expected FanDuel points for last week, Godwin led, but he fell behind in terms of his, conversion on that opportunity, underperformed by about 6.5 points. Mike Evans and Antonio Brown overperformed by more than 12 points. So I think Chris Godwin makes a lot of sense if we're looking to deviate from the quarterbacks for tonight. Question from DJ: thoughts on Dan Arnold this week? I think Arnold's fine. It's pretty clear they want to try to get him involved, and they kind of need to get him involved. He's actually rating at about 39% likely to finish as a top 12 tight end. Definitely, very in the terms of viability, he's a consider for me in terms of my start sit column. That's definitely not someone that you would look to bench. I have some other options above him, like Hunter Henry in a game that I like a bit more, but no issues with Dan Arnold, all things considered. Jumping back to this single game slate, just want to look at the Sims once more. Leonard Fournette really stands out from a touchdown odds standpoint. He's a favorite to score on FanDuel Sportsbook at -110. He's the most likely to score a scrimmage touchdown according to NumberFire's projections. So I'm probably going to deviate from Tom Brady. I know that I said he's the most justifiable MVP play, but that's not how I play things. I like the game theory angle of single game slates. I will go with Jalen Hurts. I will go with Chris Godwin, and I will go with Leonard Fournette, primarily at MVP for tonight. I like the touchdown odds for Fournette. I like the top score odds plenty. And with Fournette, we've seen a really good workload from him. If they're playing from ahead, which is what the spread indicates, then it's not going to be a heavy Gio Bernard game. I like the touchdown odds for him. So lots of ways to go, even though it feels like we're locked into both quarterbacks at MVP. Plenty of other ways to go on FanDuel for tonight's slate. That is going to do it for me for the Thursday night NFL Q&A. Thanks for tuning in. Big thank you as well to Calvin Theobald for producing the video, running that side of things, featuring your questions. Thanks again to everyone for tuning in. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at Gdula13. Check out my DFS content on NumberFire. Best of luck tonight, and let's hit a big stack.